Okay, so I'm joined by Steven. Steven, lovely to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I tried the game out earlier, impressed. Obviously it's not too far away from being released now.
Thanks, yeah.
Just for our readers and anyone who's not aware of the game, can you tell us a little bit about the story and how it came about?
Beyond Flesh and Blood's a third-person shooter that's going to be set in post-apocalyptic Manchester about 200 years in the future. You will effectively play a character called Ethan who controls a mech, and it's your first day on the job trying to come back and reclaim the Earth after it's been ravaged by a nuclear explosion and war. And then from that the story transpires on how you get caught up in a whole world of trouble.
Just your average day then?
Pretty much, yeah.
And looking at the young protagonist who kind of stars in this game, was there any particular reason why you went for a younger guy?
We kind of the main protagonist is built into the story is we wanted to start him off young because it's his kind of character learning to become one of these frame operators, and effectively we wanted him to come across as a bit of a silent protagonist, so you get the feeling it's kind of very similar to some of the other games out there where you kind of want to feel like you're playing the character as opposed to the character driving the story and you're just following in the story. So we kind of wanted to get the player to be more immersed in that story by becoming the character and being the person controlling the frames.
And you sort of grow with him as the story goes.
Yeah,
absolutely. And the frame suits, which are obviously a key part in this game. There's 5, you said. 5 suits.
There's 4 suits.
4
in total,
suits, yeah. So what different features can people expect from each suit?
It's effectively they all follow the similar game mechanics. Each suit takes on a next stage, so the weapons will become more improved, the mechs will feel much faster, more agile, effectively more of a weaponized functions to them. You can it's more of a progression on the existing abilities, so you have more of a consistency through the characters, and then you start off as the prototype, which is the top end frame, and as you as stories transpire, you end up being dropped back down to one of the engineering mechs, and then you have to progress from there back up to the top again.
Fantastic. And the game is set in Manchester. Obviously you guys are based in the city centre, so it's an ideal location to be building the game, which is based in Manchester. Was that always an idea for you guys when building the game?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, definitely. It was just, we thought a lot of games are based in places like New York or somewhere in America or some big famous cities, and we thought, well, Manchester's kind of a famous city in its own right, mainly for the football team. And it just seemed like the best idea to really take his own backyard effectively and use that as the sort of basis for starting sort of playing the game in, and plus we could take more from our own environment than trying to recreate somewhere that we don't live in, and it kind of get more believability into the game by doing Manchester itself. So
how much work did it take for you guys going out there kind of mapping the areas, because people are going to recognise a lot of Manchester? Obviously it's going to look a bit different in 200 years.
It is, yeah.
But people will recognise parts of Manchester.
They will, yes, yeah. We've picked key areas that we want to sort of connect up. Some of the areas have slightly changed, being sort of 200 years in the future, being heavily overgrown as nature's taken back a lot of Manchester. But yeah, most of the key areas that we wanted to show are in Manchester, and we have all the kind of connecting areas trying to keep to the same aesthetic style of what Manchester is.
Fantastic. And the game's been out on the road at a few events recently across Europe. What's the feedback been like from these events?
Pretty good from what we've seen so far. I think a lot of people like the VR. I think there's been a lot of people intrigued about playing a third-person shooter in the VR, so there's been a lot of people enjoying that. And I think weirdly enough, I think a lot of people seem to enjoy tearing people apart.
Yeah, that was the next step I was going to go on to, actually, about looking at VR. I mean, has that been quite a challenge to put the game into a VR?
It has, yes, yeah. I think it's just trying to create, mainly it's elements like the user interface, trying to get that to work in VR so that as you're playing it, it doesn't feel too sort of in the way, because you can sometimes set up VR where it becomes too focused in the front of the camera and you kind of constantly seeing it, it's like almost having like a bit of dirt in your eye, I guess. Yeah. So trying to sort all that out has been one of the key elements of kind of mainly sorting this out. But I think, weirdly enough, getting a third-person game to work in VR has been kind of strangely satisfying. It's I thought it would be more difficult in what most games approach, which is a first-person view. But getting a third-person to work, it seems to work really well. So
fantastic. And with last-gen and current-gen consoles, there was the sort of the Kinect cameras, those sort of came and didn't really have that bang that everyone thought they would. Everyone's getting really excited about VR. How important do you think VR is for the game industry now and maybe for the next kind of 5 years?
I think it's going to definitely make a hell of a lot of changes. There seems to be sort of more people getting invested in, I think, into VR than they have done into the kind of any of the cameras that you get on Xbox and PlayStation. But it's, I think with VR, it is almost the next stage in gaming. Like it's that next stage of immersion that you can get players really kind of being absorbed into games, and I think it's going to do a lot for sort of pushing game technology and making developers push themselves more to produce for this technology as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And this is another game that's showing just how popular indies are. I mean, do you feel that indie games are now kind of on par with AAA titles?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think obviously they don't have the same budgets, but I think with sort of sensible decisions and sort of developing games in the same process, they can definitely get some really good games out. I mean, I play a lot of indie games at the moment, so it's just I think they're definitely sort of competing with that AAA market. It's sort of maybe not on the budget side of things, but the game quality is definitely sort of competing with the AAA market.
Yeah. Does it put AAA titles a bit to shame though? The fact that the amount of work you guys as indies can put into it with such a smaller budget, and you seem to come out with such successful games.
I suppose not necessarily. I mean, I suppose you're kind of held back by the engines and the machines themselves, that you've only got certain limits you can push to. But I think as indie developers, I mean, obviously we're going to try just as hard as the AAA developers to push that. But I think they've just got, obviously, I think you can get AAA studios could probably just push it a little bit extra because of the funding that they've got to be able to push games more. But I think by all means, indie games are definitely going to try and compete as best they can as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Any additional extras we're going to be looking at the game? Are we seeing online multiplayer or anything of that sort?
We've not 100% decided on anything just yet, but there are aims to sort of look into doing some multiplayer. We've got some wave-based mods that we're going to introduce into the game as well.
And that'll kind of come announcements later this year?
Yes, yeah.
And the game release, we're expecting it in a couple of months' time, you
said? Yes, yeah. I think it'll be sort of towards kind of be around about July time. I think we'll be looking for game release.
Yeah. And when I was looking on the website earlier, obviously you've got the kind of forum setting for the game, where people can kind of talk about issues that might have come up in the game or just general feedback. Do you think that's quite important for gamers to give you that immediate feedback so you guys can constantly work on it?
Yes, definitely. I mean, it's always good to find out what kind of your audience is, because I mean, that's who we're effectively developing the game for. As much as we kind of develop it from our own perspective, how we want to develop a game, we've got to definitely get the audience feedback and sort of see how people are finding the game, where we can maybe improve the game and sort of make it better. And it just helps games grow. I think knowing what people do like, what the kind of growing trends are, and how we can improve things, it's always a fountain of knowledge, really.
Fantastic. Last question. Are Man United and Man City still around in 200 years?
They haven't been introduced in the game, but it may be possible we could introduce some elements of that.
Some sort of robot football. Yeah. Give Aguero some robotic legs.
Do a futuristic improvement on the whole football game, yeah. That could be interesting.
Stephen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, cheers.
Cheers, mate.